Good evening, darlings, and welcome to episode 4 of Greenwood Talks. Oh my gosh, this has become such a magical thing now that this is now starting the last week of a full month of making videos with you all. It's just been so amazing, and thank you all again so much for all of the submissions, making it possible for me to be going on for so long with all of the videos. I'm becoming completely inarticulate by how excited I am about that. So let me just continue to move on. I didn't get any questions asking for life advice per se, but I did have an anonymous person submit a whole series of questions for me about certain personal views or opinions or experiences. So we're going to do that as this week's episode. So I hope that you all will enjoy that. The first one is a little bit more serious, and then the others are much more fun, darlings. So the first question is, what are my personal views on homosexuality? Now, this, of course, very timely considering everything coming up with this wedding. Now, I would like to say first and foremost that, of course, my views are sort of in flux right now because before all this came out, I took a much more traditional approach. We elves don't really condone the sort of homosexual lifestyle out there. I understand that it's not a choice, but it's just always something that we've sort of looked down upon for a number of reasons that I can't even begin to get into because that will take hours. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to say that, of course, we know, if you've seen some of my previous videos, there was one relationship that I had with a man, and so of course I sort of can understand how, if perhaps Elven culture was a little bit more friendly towards that sort of lifestyle, perhaps when I was younger I would have been more open-minded, and maybe who knows what could have happened, darlings. Not to say that that my wife was not the most precious person in my life, other than, of course, my darling ray of sunshine. So by no means would I say that I would become 100% homosexual. Of course, I do take an interest in women, darlings. But as far as a relationship that I might have pursued, perhaps I would have considered a man. But darlings, I'm so stuck in my ways now. I just can't really see myself with a man anymore, darlings. It's just I don't know. I suppose that's really it. I'm there's a lot going on, and things are sort of tied into this whole wedding, and I don't love my son any less, and he's still the person that I've watched grow up into this amazing, wonderful young man. But of course, I am sad about not having grandchildren. So, I've been perhaps a little harsh, considering that it's sort of hypocritical of me to be so hard on him for pursuing a relationship with a man, because of course I have had those urgings myself. I, of course, didn't act on them. But he is much more like his mother than he is like me. He definitely follows more his heart than his head at times. As we can tell by him still not calling me back, darlings, but he has sent me many lovely messages, and that's certainly brightened my day. So I forgive him. I'm sure he's working out a lot of things on his own right now. There's a lot going on for the both of us. So I'm sorry I can't give you a straight and narrow answer, no pun intended, darling. So let's just move on because I'm far too sober for all of this. The next question is, what is my favorite coffee shop and my favorite thing to order? Now, Darlings, I'm afraid I'm usually too busy to even consider going to a coffee shop. I don't really drink coffee that often. There are times if there's a lot of meetings coming up sort of early, and perhaps I was out at a business dinner or something the night before and maybe had a few drinks too many to sort of get myself started easily. We do have this. How do you pronounce it? Ranchillo, I believe, espresso machine at work. So my secretary will, if need be, he will make me an espresso, occasionally with cream, but I don't put any sugar or any sort of thing like that in it, darling. There's no need for that. If you're going to drink coffee, you might as well drink the coffee. You know what I'm saying? Um, and the bitterness just sort of wakes you up a bit. Uh, if if um, if I had to choose a favorite thing, I've never, well, I guess I've been in them before, but not for many years. Sort of when Starbucks first was starting to get a little bit popular. That's sort of the last time I was in one, just to sort of see what they had. When I was killing some time in an airport, but I've not actually spent any time in a coffee shop, so I'm not sure. I hear they have sort of breakfast foods and maybe sandwiches and sorts of things. At least that's what they used to have. Um, I suppose I would like, well, an espresso. If I'm going to do it, I might as well get what I know, and perhaps some sort of breakfast sandwich or something. Something with protein, darlings. I need some protein first thing in the morning. I always have it. So something along that sort of line, I suppose, is what I would go in for. The next question is, what's the most bizarre thing you have made or eaten? Now, I don't really make very bizarre foods by anyone's standards, I don't think, unless sort of fish or some sort of game meat like venison or rabbit is sort of unusual for you. Um, but unless you're thinking really bizarre things, I don't really tend to make them at home, just because they're a little harder to find. And of course, darlings, I'm always traveling and so busy. If I find something, I'll pick it up, but I don't tend to seek them out too often. As far as the most bizarre thing I've ever eaten, I had to actually look up what the English word was for this because, of course, it's something that I ate last year when I was working with a government organization in South Korea. So I actually didn't know what it was that I had eaten, although I had had it maybe 2 or 3 times with some work colleagues. It's called monge in Korean, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. My Korean is absolutely well, it's terrible, darlings. But apparently it's called either a sea pineapple or a sea squirt. Um, they're just sort of these sort of bulbous creatures that have sort of this is looking absolutely horrible, but it does have sort of a tube sort of thing that comes out. They tend to be sort of white or beige with sort of a pink tube. This sounds absolutely bizarre, but they're quite good, sort of more of a shellfish sort of texture, but actually more the flavor. I don't really recall too much. There's usually you put sort of a spicy gochujang style sauce and raw sliced garlic on top. So I don't really remember. We ate so many different things that night. It was in Busan, which is, of course, one of the big port cities, the second largest city in South Korea, and there's some amazing seafood there. And we went with a Korean American friend and colleague, and we just had an absolute wonderful time there, darlings. So if you ever want to try monge, I don't know where outside of Asia you can get it, but by all means, it's certainly an experience, and it's quite tasty. So I highly recommend it. Now, the next question is, what are you willing to try, and what do you hate? I'm assuming you still mean about food, perhaps. unless you mean sort of more generally what I'm willing to try, well, I'm not a particularly adventurous person, darling. Of course, I love travel and seeing new things, but I sort of tend to tiptoe into sort of culinary experiences, just because well, I sort of have a thing about textures, darling. Certain textures I have trouble keeping down, um, so I just sort of have to be very careful. And I'm not, well, although I enjoy them, I just sort of can't handle a high amount of spicy food. Probably because I didn't grow, well, that's a lie. My father used to enjoy so much spicy food, darling. You would think that he was trying to become a dragon, the amount of heat he put on everything and anything. But I sort of don't have that ability, so although I enjoy a lot of spicy foods, I just sort of can't eat them. So I'm willing to try a lot of things, but just sort of not too spicy. So a lot of times that's a problem since there's so much delicious spicy food out there. As far as what do I hate? Well, I don't eat pork, darlings. It just doesn't agree with me, you know. And I don't like a lot of sort of condiment sort of things. I'm not into mustard or mayonnaise or sour cream, sort of those or cottage cheese, those sorts of white condiments. Just sort of not my thing, darling. So I absolutely hate them, you know. And I don't really like very sweet things either. If the sort of fruit flavors are there, I can sort of do a little bit more of it, but like chocolate or candy, that sort of thing, if it's very sweet, I just absolutely can't stand it. Sort of dark chocolate or chocolate that has another flavor sort of mixed in, just cut some of that sugar. I don't mind that though. And I'm glad that I can make you smile, darling, Smita. And I'm just going to wrap this up now because it's getting a little long. So thank you again for tuning in, darlings, and I cannot wait until I can see you again next week. So ta-ta.